friends, and fellow citizens. The figures in front of me for 1981 for the industrial countries show a decline in the GNP of Britain by 1.5%, of France by 0.5%, of West Germany by 1.5%. West Germany going down by 1.5% compared to last year, a prediction by the OECD. The Americans will go up by 2.5%, the Japanese by 3.5%. So, fortunately for us, because we took some bold decisions 2.5 years ago, we may escape this. Because all these countries with minus GNPs and high unemployment rate, France 7.5%, UK 10.5%, Germany 4.75%, are going to put up tariffs. Maybe not the Germans, but you know that we've been facing troubles. So, restructuring, moving out from low value added products, products likely to meet tariff and quotas, tariff wars and quotas, is a must. How do we succeed? Two factors. One, better educated, better trained, better disciplined workers with higher skills, higher knowledge, better work attitudes. Second, and that leads to it, higher productivity. It's a simple word, productivity. But I have had to spend several years grappling with this problem to seize hold of the meaning, the significance of that, of a series of concepts embraced in that one simple word, productivity. It means you get more out of a workforce with the same working hours. How do you get more? By more capital investment per worker. That's how the Japanese have done it. The Japanese now have so automated and use so many robots in their motor industry that they need about 30 workers to produce 3,000 cars a week. And Detroit is going to have a very difficult time. You can have restraint, 7-8% restraint in exports. But the sheer capacity of 30 Japanese workers manipulating robots. And to manipulate robots, you need highly trained, highly disciplined, highly motivated workers. Whereas if you get the American worker disinterested, unmotivated, well, you are in trouble. And in a Japanese factory, a motor factory, I read the comparison recently. 9,000 recommendations from the workers, on how to improve the assembly line. And all they get is recognition, their photographs and acknowledgement. General Motors pays a few $1,000s for each suggestion proposed, and they get 900 suggestions a year, of which half are adopted. So you see the difference in the motivation of the worker. He's always thinking how he's going to do his job better. He's always making suggestions. It's not the manager who can think up these ideas, because the manager is not manipulating the machine, he's not on the assembly line. It is the highly motivated and intelligent worker who then sits down with a group of 3 or 4, either called QC circles or zero defect circles, and they work it out. And of course, their management is also efficient. Our graduates, and I've got quite a lot of feedback from the employers' associations, whom I met recently, have paper qualifications. They are good engineers, they're good economists. They don't like to go to the factory floor and soil their hands. They don't know what happens on the factory floor. So how can they order more efficient work? Our economics graduates have no idea of personnel management, human industrial relations. Social science graduates, whole lot. And so the Singapore National Employers Federation and the German Business Group, in their submissions to the National Productivity Board, suggested that part of the training during vacation is to send them to the offices and the factories. And more important, to send their teachers, the assistant professors and the professors, so that they will understand what is the product that they are going, or they are expected to produce in the student. What is he supposed to perform? There's no dovetailing at the moment. And of course, all this should start from the schools. Team spirit, teamwork. And it should start with the teachers. My meeting with this business, with the American, German, Japanese, Singapore National Employers Federation, which I'm told is a group of British, Japanese, Germans, and others, including Singaporeans, was most instructive. Now, the most disturbing facet of my discussions, reading their submissions, these were carefully considered written submissions, was that if we had to depend on Singapore entrepreneurs, we would not have today's Singapore. It's a damning admission for me as Prime Minister to tell you this, but I think you should know that. Rolai may have failed, but no Singapore firm could have run Rolai. It would have failed long time ago. We may have been traders, but we do not understand management. We do not understand, our managers don't understand productivity. Otherwise, how can I get a submission from the Chinese Chamber of Commerce telling me, yes, why should we confine the CPF being managed by the employers to only big employers of 300 or more employees? We small shopkeepers can also handle it. I don't think they have the slightest clue what this was about. I also want to add that reading the NTUC second-rung leaders yesterday, no, day before, on the recommendations of the Committee on Productivity was cause for discomfort. Either they do not understand or they do not dare to face up to the problems and publicly tell their members, this we must do. And this is what is happening with trade unions and trade unionists in Europe. They tell the employer when they meet in discussions, yes, they understand all this and so on, but of course, you know, when I go and meet my members, I've got to tell them something different. Because I got to show them that I'm fighting for them. That's not the way to survival. I want to read you extracts of 4 of the submissions. Good ones. They educated me, they instructed me. I choose them in alphabetical order: Americans, Germans, Japanese, as Singapore National Employers Federation, AGJS, because otherwise it may be invidious. There is a certain candor about the Americans which make them likable. And they put this out in their press conference. I didn't see it in the newspapers. Newspapers should have printed this in bold type. 5th point. The Singapore government, in its desire to provide for its citizens, has developed wage policies and social programs such as CPF, which causes a worker to feel his future and security is dependent on the government rather than the employer. That's a very profound remark, that the Singapore worker believes his future and his security is dependent on the government rather than the employer. Then, says the American Business Council, which should have been in bolder type, employers do not invest in Singapore to provide jobs and welfare programs for the Singaporeans. Enterprises must strive for reasonable profit and control costs to ensure a competitive position in the marketplace. If this is not achieved, bankruptcy or receivership will surely happen. Wow. See, common sense. They go right to the heart of the problem. And they add, just by the way, they find the Singapore worker hardworking, positive, highly motivated, but individualistic, like the Americans. So the Americans are not as critical as the Japanese are of our workers. But then the Americans are losing to the Japanese. But they point out, as do the Germans point out, Productivity Council should also review conditions where many sales girls are non-productive in department stores, hotels, restaurants, and similar establishments. The German made this point. He's a very shrewd man, Mr. Porwa. He says the Singapore paradox. It is well known throughout the world that workers of Singapore are very busy and industrious. One can easily see this when, looking around the Kallang area, small marine wharfs build ships with the highest skill. One finds this in any area where the demand for performance matches the ability to perform, and the worker concerned can identify with the fate of the enterprise involved. The worker concerned can identify with the fate of the enterprise involved. Then he says, touring the shopping centers, factories, office buildings, one often observes operators or clerks not in the least interested in the fate of the enterprise, just chatting and being non-productive. And he's a German, you know, writing to me in English, says, to be successful, you must instill a certain high fidelity feeling in some teams. That means a sense of loyalty, a sense of trustworthiness, high fidelity. And he puts it in an attractive and vivid way. He says, management problem is that they should not forget that not only the brain and the hands, but also the hearts of people should be working for the company. That's well put. Not only brains and hands, but get the worker's heart. That's exactly what the Japanese have been doing. So when I met them here in Singapore, this is the managing director, you know, of the company, employing some 3,500 workers. On the anniversary of the company, they invited the workers to bring all their families to come and celebrate. Nobody came. Family not interested in the future of the company. So he said, why is this? Maybe it's the wrong format. So he says, all right, Chinese New Year, we invite them. They all came. Well, that's progress. His worker gets married. He turns up for the worker's wedding. He is interested in the future of his worker. I'll be hard put if you ask me to attend my office workers' weddings, because I see quite a number of them are young, and I don't think I should be attending weddings. But this man did, because that's what he does in Japan. And he says it's very strange, you know. I was not introduced to the father-in-law, the mother-in-law, and so on. We just sat around. So I said, well, you know, we inherited a British tradition. And British bosses never attend the weddings of their workers. So they were probably honored but embarrassed and at a loss what to do. But the heart of the worker, that's what productivity is about. Let me go back to the American Business Council. This is, we favor the Productivity Council. We favor a portion of the funds now in the CPF to be managed by the employer as an employer's pension and other benefit programs. But they point out that what's lacking is practical work exposure for young people, both secondary and university. And this applies to the educators as well. And that's what's wrong. We are turning out students, graduates, VITB, Polytechnic, students who think that their moment of achievement has arrived when they get their diploma or their degree. And they all take pictures with their caps and gowns, and that's the summit of their career. But any American will tell you that's the foothills, and you then begin the long climb up the mountain. And the Americans made a valid point when they said, look, if a company can show that the majority of its workers do not want a union, must we have a union? And I say, no, I agree with you. If the union serves no function, out with it. Now let me go back to the German. He's a practical man. He says, never mind all this talk about campaigns and movements. What you want are special action. Training, more training. What do you mean by productivity? And you must train people on techniques. How to achieve a job with less effort, less time, less defects. That means training. And why is he having so much difficulty getting money out of the Skill Development Fund? One committee dealing with hundreds of applications. And if we want to be a technological society, why is our transport system not geared for shift work? Because you don't install expensive equipment to run one shift. If you are going to install automated, computerized equipment, you want to run it 24 hours a day and get as much return as you can. In other words, your transport system should be geared to make it convenient for your workers to go into the second and third shift. So he says, let's sit down, coordinate working hours, recommend training priorities, tool making, for instance, statistics on national productivity. And he also points out the lack of realism amongst postgraduates. And he thinks it can be avoided by holiday work. But the most impressive to me is the Japanese Chamber of Commerce. Their philosophy is one that will ensure that they will always be there, out in the forefront. It permeates every sentence. I just read you extracts. It says, firstly, enterprises should be continuously rejuvenated by ceaseless investments, as we are of the belief that in order to compete worldwide, industries must always keep up with advanced technology. If not, senility symptoms will occur and the vitality of the enterprise will vanish. Second point, an enterprise cannot exist only with machineries. It's Japanese English, but never mind, you understand what it means. It is not the machines. The fundamental structures of an enterprise are human beings. Therefore, the ultimate result of the progress of the enterprises will be the progress of the human beings. And therefore, the loyalty towards the company reflects the happiness in the employees and is only rational. So he's investing not only in the machines, but in the human being. And he wants lifelong investment because having invested him, he sees no point in this chap hopping off to another competitor. There's a different philosophy. I don't think we can achieve that because we are more like the Americans. We are immigrants, and who pays us better? Well, that's the market rate, and if you can't, it's not just the company. The Singapore government, Chairman PSC tells me that this year he lost 16 top scholars, all bonded. Mind you, that inflation has gone on, so the company says, how much is the bond? $150,000 here you are paid. And out he goes. We have invested in him. I think we must index the bond for inflation and make it more expensive for the companies. It says, what we favor is the prospects of long service where an employee will have the opportunity to innovate on his job, improve his skills and know-how, creating an interest in his work. Japanese enterprises are still on the lookout for advanced technologies and are willing to invest enormous sums of money in improving technology and manufacturing new products in order to compete in world markets. And they spent a lot of time thinking out these problems. And they did me a little table to show how different systems, different employers pay differently. In Japan, basic wage, if they put down 100 as index, fringe benefits is 80 to 100. And by fringe benefits, they mean allowances, overtime, bonuses, compulsory welfare, voluntary welfare, 80 to 100. So the total is index of 180 to 200. In Europe and America, the basic wage is 100, fringe benefits is 20, total 120. Of course, the 100 will be more because it will be a bigger wage, but less fringe benefits. So the Japanese concept is low wage, fringe benefits equal to wages. They have worked out our fringe benefits, which the Singapore Chinese Chamber of Commerce complains bitterly about. And it works out to Singapore basic wage 100, fringe benefits 50 to 60, total 150 to 160. Compared to the Japanese, 180 to 200. Now, if you ask me, I say I move towards the Japanese. It's a safer method. It binds the link between the worker and his company. Let me tell you the problem. The Singapore voter has voted for the PAP since 1959. 59, 63, 68, 72, 76, 80, 6 times. We have delivered. One day, there will be a worldwide recession. I hope not in the next 4 years. I think we are all right. So we'll win 84, 85. But the link is, I vote for you, PAP, now you deliver. But how does the PAP deliver? The PAP has delivered by creating conditions which allow entrepreneurs to invest and get a good return on capital. Create conditions of stability, certainty, good water supply, constant power, good communications, telex, telephones, aircraft, ships, containers, the lot. High returns, trainable workers. So the benefits. But the linkage is wrong, you know. The Japanese linkage is better. Mr. Suzuki never, the Prime Minister, no Japanese Prime Minister says, you vote for me, the LDP will give you all these things. Oh, let me read you what a Japanese company does for his worker. In return for loyalty and identification with the company, he gets company welfare, medical and dental care, housing, which means hostels, housing loans, other types of loans at highly subsidized rates, family recreational facilities, education of employees' children paid for by the company, farewell and welcoming parties. When you retire, they say farewell. When you come, they welcome you. Long service gifts, employee stocks, congratulatory and condolence allowances. Your father dies, they give you something. Your wife has a child, they give you something. Discount on company products. What is all this about? Heart, isn't it? They get the worker's heart. The worker knows that if the company goes down, he is down. And so he's thinking up new ideas, and that's why Toyotas, Datsuns, Hondas are outselling now all the small range cars in Europe and America and throughout the third world. Yes. That's why the linkage. So we have proposed that we get out of this British system. You know, now they think, well, NWC, $32 plus 6 to 10%. All right, now give me. Who says give me? The government says give me. NWC, what's that? Oh, the government plus the employers and the NTUC. So just give me. Who produces the goodies to give you? That's not their business. I think we move away from that before we run into trouble. We are not magicians, and I worry for the next generation leadership. I think we transfer welfare to the company. We can't do it overnight. And anyway, basic welfare, whether it's health, housing, will have to be, the bare minimum must be met by the government. But I think the extras, we shift it on to the company. So when the company does well, see, just like the Japanese, they carry a flag and whole aeroplane load of company workers follow the flag on a holiday. See, that means the company prospered. Company doesn't prosper, everybody stays at home. So there's a direct nexus. Now, this is the problem. The British never, we have inherited the British system, and you see how grievously they have harmed themselves. So it's just nationalize. Oh, well, redistribute wealth. Squeeze the rich until the pips squeak. That's all. It sounds wonderful at election time. When they actually squeeze the pips, they find the pips have run off and settled in Mallorca or some tax-free haven and removed all their capital, and the country's gone down. And when the Germans begin to face that trouble, I get very worried. Now, the SPD has been giving more and more welfare. You are unemployed, you get about 90% of your wages for first 3 months or whatever it is. They were explaining to me in Austria why Austria is doing better than Germany, because in Austria you're unemployed, you get only half your wages. They said, but of course the Germans, they're a bigger country, they're wealthier, so they gave more. So if you want to take a holiday and you lose your job, just forget about it. Just lose 10%. You can moonlight, and probably instead of losing 10%, you can make another 50 or 60% without paying income tax. So you get a kind of sort of gray market. And the Deutschmark has been going down by 25% to the dollar since the beginning of this year. Why? Because the deficit, balance of payments deficit is widening. So there had to be a great compromise between the Social Democrats and the Free Democrats in the coalition. And out of $108 billion budget, $8 billion had been cut off. But the German bankers tell me that's not enough. So the mark did not recover. They say, well, first it must go through the Bundestag, that's their parliament, and you never know, it may never go through because there are many left-wing SPD members who may vote against these cuts because they've been promising their workers. Secondly, in any case, that's not enough. So, if you tell me the British are less hardworking, less patriotic than the Japanese, I say yes, it tallies with my observation. But if you tell me the German is less hardworking, less patriotic, less group conscious than the Japanese, I find that very difficult to believe. Because that's not my memory, that's not my impression of the German. But if in fact this is so, that means the system, the linkage is wrong. The political party, I give you my vote, now you get into government, you give me the goodies. How does the government provide the goodies? It depends upon Siemens, Mercedes, Benz, you name all the big names, Host, BASF, Bosch, the lot. They are the people, they are the engines for growth. And the Japanese have got it right. You look to your engine for growth. When they do well, you do well. And that's the reason for the proposals that we slowly hive off to those companies that show that they have the capacity to manage pension funds. Use it. They probably get a better return than the CPF can. But we must make sure that it is there, proper accounting. And they can give more benefits. But I think the union must be asked to agree for all workers to switch to this new scheme. But new workers, I think we should try and get them onto this new scheme. So in 10, 15 years, they won't be looking to my successor and say, look, give me. They'll be looking to the company. And that makes sense to me. I want to just read one or two items from the Singapore Manufacturers National Employers Federation, because they made some very sensible proposals. National Employers Federation says, and they got to the nub of the problem. the relations aspect of productivity is decisive. American technology and management systems are superior to the Japanese. Those in the Western nations are at least on par with the Japanese. Yet the Japanese are ahead in productivity performance. This can be explained by a better work attitude amongst Japanese workers and a closer relationship between Japanese management and workers. By Japanese standard, there is a general neglect of human relations in the aspect of productivity in Singapore. And they suggested that in the Productivity Council, we should include academics from the National University and from the NTI, and I think from the Poly and NIAN, so that the teachers will go back and instill the right attitudes. You must learn how to motivate your workers. I want to end by telling you what Devon Nair discovered when I sent him to SIA, and it's human relations. That's gone wrong. I'm not reciting this to castigate the management or the pilots or the workers of SATs, but to try and get everybody in Singapore to understand how even a successful company can begin to go sour when human relations go wrong, and how they can improve in spite of their good performance if they get their human relations right. First, Devon Nair asked, who does SIA belong to? Asked the workers. The chap says, many workers says the Singapore government. Some said it belonged to Joe Pillay. No worker said the SIA belonged to him. I've seen the Japanese, I think about 12 of them. And every one of them is proud that he's a Hitachi, or he is a Mitsubishi, or a Marubeni, or whatever man he is. And if you ask who does the company belong to? The chairman and me, all of us. There is no identification with the company because the management do not identify themselves with the workers. And human relations are poor. Pilots, they say we're going to, this is second-class hotel. Since I'm flying a 747 equal to Pan Am, BA, Qantas, I want a first-class, 5-star hotel. And they got it. So the cabin crew, you know, the girl that appears in the advertisements, millions of dollars, she goes into a 3-star hotel. The captain and pilot cockpit crew goes into a 5-star hotel. Now that's being put right. Captain is the captain, he's in charge, including cabin crew. Then Devon discovered that when the executives meet with the unions, everybody on the executive side wears a necktie to the lowest clerk to show that they are executives, you see? Everybody on the union side, open neck shirt. There's something wrong with the psychology. The first thing we did in 1955 was to campaign with open necks. to make it possible for the worker to identify himself with me. If I'm with a necktie and a coat, and he doesn't own one, it's a bit difficult, isn't it? If you cast your mind back in 1959, we changed the rules of Parliament to allow members to go without neckties. It was in the rules that we had to wear a necktie and a coat. The British wanted everybody with a tie and a coat. And here is SIA. 20 years after the British have left, all executives wear ties, meet workers on the other side without ties. So you are a different class. Where is the rapport? Where is the empathy? And Devon said he went to Hitachi Zosen shipyard, and he saw a man in overalls with a helmet talking to him. And he said, "Who are you?" He says, "I'm the personnel manager." And he looked just like the other workers. And so did 6 other divisional directors. And one of the rules of the Japanese management system is everybody wears the same. We are all in the same boat. Of course, some are up on the captain's bridge and others are in the engine room. And if the ship sinks, all will sink, and the captain must go down with the ship. But at least the heart, as the German company puts it, you know, the heart of the Japanese worker. And if you go to Korea or Taiwan, where the Japanese had governed for 40 years in the case of Korea and 50 years in the case of Taiwan, you go to the enterprises. They have learned. They all wear the same. They all eat in the same canteen, but not in SIA. Executives eat in a different canteen. All this makes for trouble, isn't it? So the union says, look, you can't deal with my worker, my members. Any grievance, you deal with me. So the union leader becomes a power broker. No manager can settle a dispute. He must see the union leader, and it becomes a big issue. Well, that's being changed. But once things go wrong, of course, then you get the them and us approach. Them meaning the bosses. And Hao Yun Chong told me that when the British sent trade unionists here 30 years ago to defeat the communist trade unionists, they said, of course, our job is to make the company bankrupt. Is to knock the employers down and make the company bankrupt. Well, they have succeeded remarkably. British Leyland's bankrupt, British Steel's bankrupt. But I think we move away from that. It's us. SIA closes down, they are all out. From Joe Pillay down. And Joe Pillay first. And when you get this kind of antipathy, then you want to get every ounce out of the employer. So SATU has an agreement with the employers for A-class beds in hospital. So because so many government servants are in A-class beds, there are no A-class beds for the private sector, they are sent to B-class beds. So SATU says, pay me the difference. Well, what sense does this make? You are sick, you're entitled to A-class bed, company prepared to pay for it, government servants have priority, have filled up the A-class beds, give me the money for being sick. The next step, of course, there is an A-class bed, says, no, I prefer a B-class, give me the difference. And you take the attitudes, productivity. You know, every time an aeroplane comes in, somebody drives up the ladder. They call it an operator of passenger steps. And he's got a crew of 3, so there are 4 of them. And CIAS Changi International Airport Services run by PSA has only 3, doing exactly the same amount of unloading. Why does SATS have 4? Because of this antagonism. My job is only to drive this. I've driven it, well, all right, I wait. Unloading finish, I drive it off. But fortunately, we insisted against SIA's wishes that there shall be competition and PSA will move in. So we know that it can be done by 3. And job definition must be altered. Of course, if you don't give them a little bit more money to start with, there'll be heartburn. But never mind, we'll start off with a little bit more money, but there will be 3. And it amounts to bad human relations. Because it's not my job, I don't care. I'm just driving this. That's that. The fact that another crew can do it with 3, it doesn't belong to me. So we had the trouble with the pilots. Flight operations manager, all senior pilots, never bothered to explain why, what, no communications. Not only that, they pass each other. Every pilot has to take 3 tests a year. So the Director of Flight Operations, Assistant Director of Flight Operations, and 6 management pilots test them all. But 5 of them, they test each other and pass each other. So it must get around the other pilots and it must get to Devon's ears. Surely this is not possible to conceal it. This is misdemeanor. How can you command the respect of the men you're doing? Things have gone wrong even with appraisal of cabin crew. The chief cabin crew steward is a member of the union. So it tells the cabin crew, says, I'm giving you an A or a B or a C. Are you voting for Doraisamy or for Clarence De Silva? If you vote for Doraisamy, I'll give you a good report. You vote for Clarence De Silva, I'll give you a bad report. Something has gone sour, isn't it? We put it right, and we have proper management stewards who will not be members of the union. And to cut a long story short, productivity will come the day we get it into everybody's head that he has a critical contribution. That is human relations, it's got to do with self-respect, it's got to do with cooperation between workers and between worker and manager on the same side. And I tell you why the Japanese succeed. When we ask them, do you want unions? The Americans say, no. If our workers do not want a union, we prefer not to have a union. Not the Japanese. MacArthur foisted the union on them. MacArthur thought that they went to war and became a menace to the world because they had no unions. So he says, you will have unions. And they put the communists, freed the communists from jails, and the communists ran the unions and gave them trouble. But you know, in a typically Japanese way, they adopted and absorbed the union. So the union is given excellent premises, company premises, part of the union office. Very convenient. And what's more, all successful union leaders end up in top management. If you are a successful union leader, then you should be running the workforce, a bigger workforce. You shouldn't be running around for all these grievances. Here, you run the personnel department. That's how it's done. And that's what we have to beat. I do not for one moment believe that we are going to be like the Japanese. We can't. First, we are heterogeneous. 75% Chinese, you can break them down into Hokkiens, Teochews, Hainanese, Cantonese, Fuchows. You give them all the same honey pinyin, there's a tremendous hubbub who they want to keep their separate dialect identity. We're trying to unify people. We are not going to make the Hindus into Buddhists. You are not going to make the Muslims into Hindus. And we've got to accommodate. And we don't have homogeneous employers. We've got Americans, Germans, British, Japanese, Dutch. But we can experiment and implement certain basic concepts. The Japanese are willing to try immediately management of their part of the CPF and improve on welfare. But it will take time. I told them it's not possible because the American view is housing, health, so is the German. All that is a state responsibility. Well, in that case, we let the Japanese try. We will run it with the Japanese. And those who join the Japanese company will know over 3, 4, 5 years whether they are better off or worse off. And I think the Japanese will see to it that they are better off. And several government companies will try. Then by a process of trial and error, we'll work out several models which will improve on what we have. This is not a static world. It doesn't mean that because we have arrived, therefore, this is our position in the league. It isn't so, you know. At the end of the war, the Americans produced 50% of the world's GNP, of the non-communist world's GNP. They then restored Western Europe and Japan. A magnanimous, far-sighted act. Now they have to compete with the Europeans and the Japanese. And their GNP is only 25% of the non-communist world GNP. Their productivity is going down, and Japanese productivity is going up. We assume that the Germans were always going to stay on top. And suddenly, they have run into balance of payments difficulties, and the Deutschmark gets weak. Social spending cuts may or may not be sufficient, and problems have arisen. So there is nothing static. We will stay on top of our problems provided we understand that there is no God-given law which says that Singapore will have 5% to 10% growth a year. You may end up with a minus. Then you will vote another government in, madder than the last one, and you'll end up with a bigger minus. Then all the bright people will flee and leave the country. I've seen it. I was in Jamaica in 1975. In April. Marvelous country. 2,000 square miles. They nationalized bauxite. They nationalized many things. They promised all things to all men. They are bankrupt. The World Bank has got to come to their rescue. But can they? All the good men have left. So the economy took a nosedive. Do you think you can get them to come back? It's not easy. It's the same problem with Sri Lanka. When Air Lanka, and you might as well know this, because when you go down to come up again, may never be possible. The President wanted to restart Air Lanka. We had several Air Lanka nationals working for SIA. So he says, will you release my nationals? I said, of course. Well, let me tell you that the Sri Lankans wanted to stay as SIA workers. They say, we are seconded to Air Lanka. So they are SIA, they are Sri Lankans working for SIA, running Air Lanka. And if there's a change of government in Sri Lanka, they are coming back to Singapore to work in SIA. Why should they? So, friends and fellow citizens, we've got one little island, 600 square kilometers. You unwind this, you will not drop down on soft paddy fields. It's hard concrete, your bones are broken, and it's kaput. And if you want to know why I am tough, it's because I know what happens. I travel, and I'm not looking at the tourist sites. As they show me these things, I'm carrying on a quiet conversation. I said, look, by the way, how much are you paid? And you get behind the wrapping down to the skeleton, and you know that Singapore has only one chance, and that is to go up. Tighter, more discipline, up the ladder. You unwind this. It's curtains for everybody. On that note, I wish you, I'm confident this is a good year, so I wish you a happy and a prosperous year. And I say if you want many more such happy and prosperous years, just be as hard-headed, be as determined that you will not make foolish mistakes. You will not go for soft policies, as I have refused soft policies each time and each election. And every time I see a stupid article in the Straits Times, I say that chap should be sent to Jamaica and find out how much the Jamaican journalists are paid. The future is in our hands. Seize it firmly. Make your children work. Make them the best possible workers possible. Not all will make it to the university. But even if they are carpenters, but they are good carpenters, you will have good houses, good furniture. This is a good and thriving country. Thank you.